going on, guys? My name is Brandon Collier, and I am the host and founder of the Brothers of Merit podcast. This is our first episode, and first and foremost, I wanted to thank you for checking it out. I hope you can get out of this what I'm putting into it. I have a lot of cool things and cool episodes lined up with hopefully some great material that you can benefit from, and that's the ultimate goal of this, is to help you benefit from seeking advice, seeking different perspectives on life and outlooks, all of that to better yourself and to better me as a Christian man. This has been a long process. It's been probably about a month now, and here I am finally recording the first episode. Leading up to this, it's just been a lot of tech information that needed to be put in and completed, websites and social media platforms and hosts and all this stuff. Um, it's not as easy as just talking into a mic, that's for sure. So thank you. So in this episode today, the first one, it'll be shorter, I'm sure, than the ones to follow. I just wanted to break down, go through a few things with you, who I am. I think it's important that you guys know a little bit of my background, so you're not just listening to some guy talk on a microphone that you have no idea who he is or what he's about or what his views are. What this show is about and the goals that I have for it. Some of the things that led me to this point, why I decided to create this podcast. And lastly, how you could help me out. How you can help not just me, but everyone out. So let's get started. I'm eager for this. Who I am. My name, as I told you at the beginning, is Brandon Collier. I'm from Hampstead, Maryland. That's where I currently live. I'm actually from Harford County, Maryland, but I live in Hampstead, Carroll County. I'm married. We've been married for about 7 years, been together for 10, and we have two children, 4.5-year-old son and 2.5-year-old daughter. I am a career firefighter. I've been a firefighter for 10 years, and career I've done it for 6 years now. And I'm also in the military. I served in the Army National Guard from 2011 until October of this year. And in October of this year, I actually transferred to the Air National Guard, where I'm a firefighter now. So my future goal in the Air Force is actually to join the chaplaincy. Maybe not become a chaplain, but I'd like to ultimately become a chaplain's assistant, which is now, it's no longer chaplain's assistant. They've renamed it to Religious Affairs Airman. So that is, I think, my ultimate goal, my sort of, I guess, my testimony. When I was 7, my mother died to breast cancer, so that shook our family up. So we went to church. I was baptized Catholic when I was born. We went to Catholic church up till I was about 6 or 7. My mom died, and from that point on, I never pursued God or church again until about 3 years ago. So from age 7 till 24, I just was not into it. Typical, angry, didn't care, took my mother from me type attitude. So that is not right. And I look back now and wish I wouldn't have, but I also look back now and think that's part of who made me who I am. So you can't regret everything, and those are things we'll all talk about throughout the episode. So in regards to parents wise, my father, he was a career firefighter as well. So to kind of paint the picture of my upbringing so you know that side of where I'm coming from, my father, which, the father is a huge role in a man's life and a boy's life growing up. So my father wasn't present as much, not in a bad way. My father was an awesome dad. He worked so much, and he knows it. We've talked before. I really wish my dad could have been there more, but he worked, a 24-hour shift just like I do. I work 24s, but I'm off 72 hours. So I work 24/72, whereas my father worked at 24/24. So he was going every other day. And then the days off, he instructed. He was an instructor in the fire service, so he did that on his days off, and he had to. He had to provide for us because my mom died. So he worked his butt off, and I hold no grudges against my father for not being there as much. But he was definitely there with love and passion and care. I never felt once growing up that my father didn't love me. You know what I mean? And that's huge. If you've ever read the book Wild at Heart, I mean, knowing that your father loves you is huge. So I can say my dad was always there. I'm very blessed and grateful for that. To move on, what is this show going to be about? So basically, my mission for this is to reach out to men and discuss the daily battles that we face, Christian or not. And that's where one thing I wanted to just disclaimer now. I wanted to throw this out there. Just because this podcast has men of faith in it and growing in faith, and that doesn't mean you can't listen to it if you aren't really religious. You know, whether it's God or whatever higher power that you have, I think you should have an higher power of, everyone should, but if you don't, that's fine. I can tell you that there are so many men throughout my life before I became, a Christian and before I really knew God that were extremely influential to me. My father-in-law is one of them. He never gave up. He always talked about God with me, and he just never gave up. Awesome guy, and he was extremely influential. And I wasn't a Christian, but I still listened to him talk. I mean, just because someone talks to you about things, and if you don't, see exactly what they see, that doesn't mean you can't learn from them. So that's something I want to say now. Hear us out, listen to the podcast and what we talk about. It's not, I'm not forcing anything down your throat. I'm not, I want to help everyone I can, and that's the point of doing this podcast. Is just to let men see things from different points of view, different perspectives and angles. I mean, that's why we all seek podcasts to begin with half the time. I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts. One of the main ones I listen to is Order of Man by Ryan Michler, and I I seek that podcast because I want to see things from a different man's view. I mean, that's just how it is. Jocko, I know many of you guys have probably heard Jocko Willink. I mean, we all do that. I mean, we all want to see what someone else and how they handle things, and are we doing it right? You're always personally grading yourself inside, and podcasts are a great way to do that. So I definitely see an upside to podcasts, and you can look if you look at the chart, Google it, check it out. They have it. I mean, it's just flown off the charts. I was looking the other day. Over 70 million people listen to podcasts a month. Per month, 70 million people. I mean, the numbers are just astronomical. So podcasts are definitely working for many people because they're continuously seeking them. So that is my mission with this podcast, is to just reach out to men. We face daily battles and struggles every single day, whether you want to believe it's Satan, if you have a higher power of God, or whatever else you want it to believe. We run into these obstacles every day with your marriage, with parenting, with work, with religion. I mean, everything in life. There's so many battles. So um, I told you guys the reason for the show was the different perspectives and outlooks, and it's because I care. You know what I mean? I want to help. That's, I think, ultimately why I became a firefighter so many years ago. Why I joined the military, and why I feel like God gave me a calling to do this podcast. I want to help anyone that I can. So what that means basically is that if 10 people listen to this podcast, then that's 10 more people that could benefit from it, and I could maybe help. If that's 100, if it's 1,000, if it's 10,000, whatever the number may be, I'm doing it just because I want to, help people out. I want to give someone another avenue, another perspective. The same reason why I seek out podcasts. So my goals really for the show, as I mentioned, were to reach as many men as possible, which I will hit on at the end of how you can help me do that, and also provide useful and beneficial content. I have been scripting and writing things out and what type of episodes I can do and what we can talk about for a while now. Just things that I hit in my daily life, things I read, things from the Bible, like what could we talk about and what do we, actually run into as men? What could we do then and talk about? And I wanted to provide you guys different views of life, of God, and how they work together. So, one of the best things that's happened to me throughout my life, obviously besides my wife and kids, is my spiritual growth. I can tell you 3 years ago, I was a completely different man than what I am now. I wasn't a bad man, I wasn't out robbing stores and, cheating on my wife and being absent from my kids and doing crazy stuff. I wasn't who I am today. And I can say that honestly and truthfully. So I really hope that you guys can see going out through these episodes that what we talk about, how they work together. Masculinity, all the confusion that comes with just life in general, of parenting. Oh my goodness, I don't know how long that we could all sit here and just go back and forth about parenting. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. And you guys are probably sitting there shaking your head and thinking, yeah, this guy's right. It is one of the hardest things I've ever done because there's no book for it. No matter how many times you read it, or try to find and Google, there's no set in stone way to handle our children. And I can't sit here and tell you how to handle your children and vice versa. So there's no book except the book that you're writing as you go along. That's the book that you should be following. So, and that's your own writing. So, what led me to this point for this podcast is actually very exciting, and that is why I said in 2018 I've had a great year. Podcast is the ultimate result, but that's not the only result that came from it. So, I'd say probably 3 months ago, back in October, my church had a men's retreat. So there's a place near us called River Valley Ranch. Awesome retreat. There's so many things to do there. So we went there from a Friday into a Saturday. And it was colder weather. Though actually there was snow on the ground because it was like one of our first snowfalls of the year. So that the sign, the image of that snow men's retreat, I mean, it was awesome. So there was about 35 men that went to it. And the study that we did throughout that weekend was actually Wild at Heart. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the book. If you haven't, I would definitely recommend reading it. It was one of the best reads that I have ever read probably in my life. It was life changing. It's by John Eldridge. He's an amazing author, and there's actually a video series that goes to it that we watched. That book gave me so much energy and it revamped me as a man, my masculinity. And that study is what started the ball rolling. And I said, I got to read this book. So the men's retreat, like I said, it was 35 of us. We went there for 2 days. We had activities. I mean, the first night, we stayed up. We were playing ultimate frisbee in the indoor gymnasium because I told you the place is awesome, until midnight. 10 on 10. I mean, it was amazing. And what came out of that, what I got from that was how much I lacked. I don't want to say I didn't lack masculinity, but I lacked the presence of men in my life. And that's a big factor in life that I've come to realize since gaining that. So what I took out of that weekend, I came back, I talked to my wife, I prayed on it for about a week or two, and finally I said, I got to do this. So there was a group of guys at my church to begin with that we've been in a small group with for a couple years now. It's been an awesome group. So finally, I went to those guys, and two of them that are not in the small group, but that are friends. I said, look, we got to make this group. I have a calling from God that I want to go further than just a small group. You know what I mean? I want to have that group of brothers, that brothers of merit, and that is where I ultimately got the name of this podcast from, was that group of men. There's 9 of us in it, and they're some of the closest friends that I've started to gain. You know what I mean? I have so many friends from back home that are awesome guys, but when I moved away from home, I moved here to Hampstead, like I said, 3 years ago, and I basically started my life, all over. I live an hour away, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you have 2 kids, and you guys, all you parents out there, you know how it is. Life gets away from you, and we just don't have the time anymore. And like I said, this is my home now. So this group of men came into a time in my life where I needed it the most. I was not on the verge, but I was just in a downtime. I felt like that, even being a firefighter, I felt like I had no mission in life. I felt like I was lacking adventure. Like I just wasn't doing something to fulfill myself as a man. So when I got this group together, we meet, every single week. We get together now on a Tuesday night for about 4 hours. We seriously have some great talks around fires and just talk, you know what I mean, and bond, and then we do things outside of just doing that. But it's been a great to do something like that. If you're a man and you have some friends, but you feel like you're lacking in the avenue of having men in your life, and then not just your parents, your father and brothers and all, but seek that out. You know what I mean? Get a group together and just really talk about things, and you'll come to find that when you have more men in your life, especially godly men, if you look in a mirror, you want yourself to be a godly man, or whoever your higher power is. And when I look in the mirror, I say the same thing. I want to be the best godly man that I can be for my wife and for my kids. But in order to mirror that, you also want to surround yourself with godly men that that can be role models for your wife and your kids. So when I put that group together, it's 8 other guys that are just awesome dudes. So definitely recommend that. Do it. Get your group together and really hash things out and talk about some of the stuff that we may talk on the podcast. I mean, it's awesome. And the last thing I would say is that my relationship with God was strengthened from that weekend. I pray typically, every day. I am human. I do sometimes go days without praying, and and if anyone can sit here and say, you can look at me bad, that's fine. But also, like I said, I'm a man, I'm human, and we all have done it. So since then, I've just prayed every single day. I've been in my Bible every single day. I've been reading. I've just felt more as a man, a better husband, a better father. All of this stemmed from that weekend, which is amazing to me. So the reason I tell you all of this, why I'm babbling on about a men's retreat that my church had that you guys really know nothing about, is because I challenge you to do the same exact thing. If you think that your church, your congregation, you yourself, your friends could benefit from something like that, do it. Have a men's retreat where it's just guys there, where you can bond and you can see what it's like to just be surrounded by godly men. Phones weren't a big issue. I mean, that all we did was just bond, played bunches of like basketball tournaments and foosball and pool and ultimate frisbee till midnight. I mean, it was like being a kid all over again with godly men and really, really good stuff. So I'm getting towards the end of here. I wanted to tell you guys how you could help us in this podcast. So now that I've finally got this first podcast recorded, I'm going to post it on the website, but I'm also going to have it, published in the Apple iTunes and Spotify and Google Play. So the first thing you could do is if you could subscribe to the podcast and rate and review it. That is huge for a podcast because the more you rate and review it, the more people that can see it and really get it out there. And I want to grow this podcast to help as many people as I can. So it starts by doing that. Second would be is to follow our social media platforms. I created a Facebook group. It's a closed group, and it's a place for where if you wanted to ask questions or talk things out, and that's the place to do it. So find us on Facebook. The website has all the links to all these Facebook things, Instagram and a Twitter and a Google Plus. I did all that. I don't even have a Google Plus or a Twitter personally. I never have had to use them. So going through all that and creating it for Brothers of Merit was pretty fun. So the second thing bookmark the website. The website will always be updated with the podcast and the blog entries for the podcast and any information I want to put on there. That's where that'll be. And like I said, join the Facebook group and follow the social media platforms. That's really the way you could do it because that's where I'll put information out about what's going on. And I social media is huge in the podcast world, and that's what I've come to realize since I've been making this podcast. So it's an easy way for me to not just sit behind a mic and talk to you guys, but also engage in other ways. Yeah, that's this is basically wraps up the first episode of the Brothers of Merit podcast, and like I said at the beginning, I can't thank you guys enough for listening to what I have to say. I'm not the best behind a mic, so that's one of the fears that I've always really had. I'm good with people, but one of my weak suits is putting words together. But the cool thing is the next week's episode that we're going to talk about is how to overcome fears, which that is one of them. And that's why I wanted to start that off the second episode because this is more of just the introductory episode and what we're about. So next week's episode, the week 2, is really going to be like our very first one with some good details and good material in it. And I decided to do overcoming fear and disregarding the doubters. And the reason I did that is because that my biggest fear of this podcast was what people were going to say and what others think. Many men in this world are worried about that. No matter how many times you say, you're not fearful of that or that's not an issue, it is. People always will be judging, and that's what we think about. People will always worry about other people judging. So week 2, next week is going to be overcoming fears and disregarding the doubters. So thank you guys for coming by. Rate and review the podcast. Subscribe to it. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. I'll get it all out there so you guys can do it. Stick with me. I promise it'll be some good material. It'll be worth your time. Thanks again, and I will see you guys next week.